The old priest sat in the darkness of the temple and told the young ones a story. His voice was soft and tired. The children gathered around him with wide eyes and trembling bodies. Long ago, he said, before our ancestors built their first ships, there was a world called Earth. It was a terrible place. The gravity crushed bones. The weather destroyed cities. Giant beasts hunted in forests so thick that light could not reach the ground. And on this world lived creatures called humans. The children shivered. They had heard this story before, but it still scared them. The humans were strange, the priest continued. When they got hurt, their bodies healed themselves. When they faced danger, they did not run. They fought. They were not the fastest or the strongest creatures on their world, but they were the most stubborn. They refused to die. One of the children raised a small hand. Are the humans real? The priest smiled sadly. No, little one. Earth is just a story, a fairy tale to remind us that the universe is vast and full of wonders we cannot understand. 3,000 light years away, Admiral Vyskith stood on the bridge of his warship and laughed at the same question. Earth, he said to his officers, you waste my time with children's stories? The officer who had spoken lowered his head in shame. He was young and foolish. He had found old records in the archives that mentioned a planet matching the description of the legendary Earth. He thought the Admiral would be interested. Forgive me, Admiral, the officer said. I only thought— You did not think, Vyskith interrupted. That is your problem. Earth does not exist. We have searched that region of space 100 times. There is nothing there but empty rocks and dead stars. The story of the humans is something weak species invented to comfort themselves. A fantasy about powerful saviors who would rescue them from their enemies. He turned back to the main viewing screen. The stars stretched out before him like scattered diamonds. The Rithani Empire controlled 200 of those stars. They were the most powerful civilization in the known galaxy. They had nothing to fear from fairy tales. But Vyskith was wrong. Everyone was wrong. Because something was coming. Something that would make even the mightiest empires tremble. The first reports came from the outer rim. A mining colony went silent. Then another. Then a dozen more. Ships sent to investigate never returned. The Galactic Concord, the alliance of the 12 great species, sent a battle fleet to find answers. They found death. The enemy called themselves nothing. They had no name, no language, no desire except hunger. The other species called them the swarm. They were insects, billions upon billions of them, traveling in ships made of flesh and bone. They did not conquer worlds. They consumed them. Every plant, every animal, every thinking creature became food for the endless hunger. The battle fleet fought bravely. They destroyed 1,000 enemy ships. But for every ship they killed, 10 more appeared. The swarm was not an army. It was a force of nature, like a flood or a fire. It could not be reasoned with. It could not be stopped. The survivors fled back to conquered space with terrible news. The swarm was coming, and nothing could stand against it. Admiral Vyskith received the reports with growing fear. His mighty warships suddenly seemed small and fragile. The weapons that had conquered 100 worlds were useless against an enemy that did not care about death. The swarm had no generals to assassinate, no cities to threaten, no population that feared destruction. They only hungered. World after world fell. The Concord fleets fought desperate battles and lost them all. Refugees flooded the inner systems, bringing stories of horror. They spoke of skies black with enemy ships. They spoke of the screaming that filled the air when the swarm landed. They spoke of watching their families dragged away to feeding pits. Hope died a little more each day. In the holy archives of the Velthari monks, an old scholar named Thessarak worked through the long nights. He was dying. A sickness ate at his body, and the doctors said he had only weeks to live. But he did not rest. He searched through ancient records, looking for something that might save his people. He found it in a file so old that the storage crystal was crumbling to dust. It was a star map. The coordinates pointed to a region of space that every official record said was empty. But this map was older than those records. It was older than the Concord itself, and it showed something impossible. A planet, a living world orbiting a yellow star in a distant spiral arm. The file contained notes written in a language that no longer existed. Tesseract spent 3 days translating them. When he finished, his hands were shaking. The notes spoke of a survey mission from 10,000 years ago. A Velthari exploration ship had found the planet and landed on its surface. What they discovered there terrified them so deeply that they buried all records and never returned. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants, and those inhabitants were everything the old stories described. They were persistent hunters who chased prey for days without rest. They formed tribal bonds and fought wars over abstract concepts. They domesticated wolves, the apex predators of their world, and turned them into loyal companions. They were immune to poisons that would kill any Concord species. They healed from wounds that should have been fatal. They were death worlders in every sense of the word. The ancient surveyors recommended that Earth be quarantined forever. The humans were too dangerous to contact, too unpredictable to trust. Better to pretend they did not exist. And so the galaxy forgot. Tesseract stared at the star map with tears running down his face. The fairy tale was real. Earth existed. The humans existed. And if the old stories were even partially true, they might be the only species in the galaxy that could stand against the swarm. He had to tell someone. He had to. The sickness chose that moment to strike. Pain exploded through his body, and he collapsed to the floor. The star map clattered from his hand and slid across the cold stone. As darkness took him, Tesseract reached toward the fallen crystal with one trembling hand. "Find them," he whispered to no one. "Find the humans. They are our only hope." His hand fell, his eyes closed, his breath stopped. But the star map remained, glowing softly in the darkness of the archive. Waiting for someone to find it, waiting to show them the path to a world that everyone believed was just a story, the path to Earth. Ambassador Kirineth found the star map 3 days after the old scholar died. She had come to the archives looking for historical records about ancient weapons. Instead, she found something far more valuable. She was young for an ambassador, barely 40 cycles old. Her people, the Velthari, lived for 300 cycles, so she was considered almost a child by some of the elder diplomats. But the war had killed most of the elders. The young ones had to step forward and lead. Kirineth studied the star map for a long time. She read the ancient notes that Tesseract had translated. She learned about the survey mission and the terrifying creatures they had found on that distant world. Most would have dismissed it as fantasy, but Kirineth was desperate. Her homeworld had fallen 2 months ago. Her family was dead. Her people were scattered across refugee ships, running from an enemy they could not defeat. She had nothing left to lose. She took the star map to the Concord Council and begged them to send a mission to find Earth. They laughed at her. "You want us to waste ships on a fairy tale?" the Rithani representative demanded. "We need every vessel we have for the defense of the inner systems." "The humans could help us," Kirineth argued. "The old records say they are warriors unlike any other. They could." "The old records are myths," another counselor interrupted. "Stories invented by primitive species who could not accept the harsh reality of the universe. There are no magical saviors coming to rescue us. We must save ourselves." Kirineth looked around the council chamber at the faces of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. She saw fear in their eyes. She saw defeat. They had already given up. They were just waiting to die. "Then give me one ship," she said quietly. "Just one small ship and a volunteer crew. If I find nothing, you lose nothing. But if I find the humans..." The council argued for hours. In the end, they gave her what she asked for. Not because they believed her, but because they wanted her to stop bothering them. They gave her an old survey vessel called the Last Hymn and permission to recruit any volunteers stupid enough to join her. She found 12. 12 souls willing to fly into the unknown based on nothing but ancient records and desperate hope. They were scientists, engineers, soldiers, and dreamers. They knew they would probably die. They went anyway. The journey was supposed to take 6 months. It took 11. The Last Hymn had to travel through swarm-controlled space. They could not use the main hyperspace routes because the enemy watched them. Instead, they jumped from system to system using ancient pathways that modern ships had forgotten. They hid in asteroid fields and gas clouds. They ran silent for weeks at a time, afraid that any signal would bring the swarm down on them. 3 crew members died when a coolant pipe burst during a jump. 2 more died from radiation exposure when their shielding failed. 4 died fighting off a swarm scout ship that found them near a dead star. 1 died from an infection that their limited medical supplies could not treat. By the time the last hymn reached the coordinates on the ancient map, only Kirineth remained alive. She was weak from hunger and exhaustion. Her scales had turned gray from stress. Her hands shook so badly that she could barely operate the controls. But she had made it. Against all odds, she had reached the system that the map called Soul. What she found made her weep. The 3rd planet from the yellow star was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Blue oceans covered most of its surface. Green and brown land masses rose from the water. White clouds swirled through an atmosphere that sensors said was toxic with oxygen. Everything about the planet screamed danger. But that was not what made Kirineth cry. Ships. Thousands of ships filled the space around the planet. They hung in orbit like sleeping predators. They clustered around a massive station that made Concord construction look primitive. They moved between the planet and its single moon with casual precision. The humans were real, and they had been here all along. A signal cut through the static on her communication array. A voice spoke in a language she did not understand. Then after a pause, it spoke again in perfect Velthari. Unknown vessel, you have entered restricted space. Identify yourself immediately or you will be destroyed. Kirineth's throat was so dry that she could barely speak. She activated her transmitter with trembling hands. My name is Kirineth, she said. I am an ambassador of the Velthari people. I have traveled very far to find you. Please, please, we need your help. There was a long silence. Then the voice spoke again, softer this time. Velthari vessel, maintain your position. A ship is being sent to escort you. Do not attempt any hostile actions. I have no weapons, Kirineth said. I have no crew. I have nothing but a message and a prayer. Another silence. Then, we are aware of the situation in Concord space. We have been watching. Hold your position, Ambassador. Someone will be with you soon. Kirineth leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her face. They had been watching. The whole time, while the galaxy burned, the humans had been watching. Why had they not helped? Why had they let so many die? A ship appeared beside the last hymn. It was small and sleek, painted in dark colors that made it nearly invisible against the blackness of space. A hatch opened, and figures in strange suits floated across to her vessel. They moved with a grace and confidence that spoke of long practice. The airlock cycled, the inner door opened, and Kirineth saw a human face for the first time. He was smaller than she expected. His skin was a warm brown color, and his eyes were dark. He looked young, though she knew that human lifespans were short by Concord standards. He wore a uniform with symbols she did not recognize. Ambassador Kirineth, he said. His voice was kind, which surprised her. I'm Lieutenant James Okonkwo. I'm here to take you to meet our leaders. Can you walk? She tried to stand and nearly collapsed. The lieutenant caught her with strong hands and held her upright. Easy, he said. When was the last time you ate? I do not remember, she admitted. He said something in his own language to the soldiers behind him. One of them produced a container of water and a package of something that smelled strange, but not unpleasant. Eat, the lieutenant said. Drink. We have a lot to talk about, but it can wait until you have recovered your strength. Kirineth took the water and drank deeply. It was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. Why? She asked between sips. Why did you not help us? You have ships. You have weapons. You could have stopped the swarm before they destroyed so many worlds. Lieutenant Okonkwo's face grew sad. That's not my question to answer, he said. But I can tell you this. We wanted to help. We have wanted to help for a very long time. The decision to stay hidden was not made lightly, and many of us disagreed with it. Then why? Because we were afraid, he said simply. Not of the swarm. We were afraid of what would happen if the galaxy learned that the stories about us were true. We were afraid that they would see us as monsters. Kirineth looked at this human, this creature from a world of death and violence, who had just given her food and water and spoken to her with kindness in his voice. I do not think you are monsters, she said. Lieutenant Okonkwo smiled. It was a warm expression that changed his whole face. Then let's go prove that to everyone else, he said. The council is waiting. And trust me, Ambassador, they have been waiting a very long time for someone to ask for our help. Admiral Vyseketh stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the end of everything approach. The Eternal Sovereignty was the largest warship the Rithani Empire had ever built. It carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Its shields could withstand bombardment that would crack a planet's surface. For 30 years, it had been the symbol of Rithani power. Now it felt like a toy. The swarm filled the view screen. There were so many enemy ships that they blocked out the stars. They moved like a living tide, flowing around asteroids and moons, always advancing, never stopping. The sensors had stopped trying to count them hours ago. The number was meaningless. There were simply too many. All Concord vessels, Vyseketh spoke into the fleet communication channel. This is Admiral Vyseketh. The enemy will reach weapon range in approximately 2 hours. I will not lie to you. We are outnumbered. We are outgunned. Many of us will not survive this day. He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew. They were scared. Of course they were scared. But they were still at their stations. They were still ready to fight. The SAR Prime is behind us, he continued. 12 billion civilians. The last major population center in Concord space. If we fall, they die. Every minute we hold the line is another minute for evacuation ships to escape. Every enemy vessel we destroy is one less that will hunt them down. He straightened his back and raised his voice. We are the last wall between the darkness and the light. We are the final defense. Let history remember that when the end came, we did not run. We stood and fought. For our homes, for our families, for the future of every species in the galaxy. The communication channel filled with responses, voices from 100 different species, all saying the same thing in their own languages. They were ready. They would fight to the last ship, the last weapon, the last breath. Vyseketh closed the channel and turned to his tactical officer. Begin final preparations. All ships to attack formation. We advance to meet them. Admiral, the sensor officer called out, I'm detecting something strange. Strange how? New contacts coming from behind us, from deep space. The officer's voice grew confused. The signatures don't match anything in our database. Vyseketh felt a chill run down his spine. Were they surrounded? Had the swarm found a way to flank them? If enemies appeared behind them while the main force attacked from the front. How many contacts? He demanded. Counting now, sir. The officer's hands moved rapidly across his console. 312 ships. They're coming out of fold space in formation. Perfect formation. I've never seen anything like it. The main view screen switched to show the new arrivals. Vyseketh stared at them, trying to understand what he was seeing. The ships were smaller than Concord vessels. They were angular and sharp, covered in armor that seemed to eat light instead of reflecting it. They moved with impossible speed, adjusting their formation as they emerged from fold space without any visible hesitation. The maneuvers they performed should have killed their crews from the acceleration forces alone. They're not swarm, the sensor officer reported. The hull composition is completely different. Metal alloys, ceramic composites. And, Admiral, I'm detecting life signs aboard those vessels. What kind of life signs? Unknown species, but definitely organic, definitely alive. Before Vyseketh could respond, a signal cut through every communication channel in the fleet. A voice spoke in the common trade language, clear and calm and utterly confident. Concord Forces, this is Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran United Navy. We picked up your distress signals and came as fast as we could. I apologize for the delay. The bridge fell silent. Vyseketh felt his legs grow weak. Terran. That was the word the old stories used. Another name for humans. Another name for the creatures from Earth. We've analyzed the enemy force, the voice continued. Big and mean, but nothing we haven't handled before. Recommend you pull your ships back to secondary positions and protect the civilian evacuation. My people will take the front line. Vyseketh found his voice. This is Admiral Vyseketh of the Concord Fleet. Who are you? Where did you come from? I just told you, Admiral. I'm Marcus Chen, and I'm from Earth. The place you've been calling a fairy tale for the past few thousand years. There was a hint of amusement in the human's voice. I understand the confusion. We've been keeping a low profile, but we saw what was happening out here, and we decided it was time to stop hiding. You cannot be serious. Earth is not real. The humans are just a story. I'm very serious, Admiral, and I'm very real. So are the 300 warships I brought with me. The amusement faded from Chen's voice, replaced by something harder. We've been watching the swarm tear through your territory for months. We've seen what they do to the worlds they conquer. It ends today. On the view screen, the human fleet began to move. They accelerated toward the swarm with terrifying speed, their formations spreading out like the fingers of a grasping hand. They did not hesitate. They did not slow down. Admiral Chen, Visiketh said, the enemy force numbers in the tens of thousands. You have 300 ships. The mathematics are against you. I've never been very good at mathematics, Chen replied, but I'm excellent at killing things that threaten my friends. Now please pull your ships back like I asked. We need room to work, and things are about to get messy. Visiketh looked at his tactical officer. The young man stared back at him with wide eyes. Sir, the officer whispered, the human ships are accelerating past anything our drives can match. Their weapons are powering up. The energy readings are... Admiral, those readings cannot be correct. What do you mean? Each of those ships is generating more power than our entire fleet combined. It should not be possible. Their reactors would have to be... He trailed off, shaking his head. I do not know what their reactors would have to be. Nothing in our science can explain this. On the view screen, the human fleet reached firing range. The first volley launched. Visiketh had seen naval combat before. He knew what weapons looked like when they fired. The beams of light, the trails of missiles, the flashes of impact. What he saw now was nothing like that. The human weapons did not fire beams of light. They fired something else entirely. Solid projectiles that moved so fast they were almost invisible. They crossed the distance between the fleets in heartbeats and struck the swarm vessels with devastating force. Ships exploded. Not one or two, but dozens at once. The projectiles punched through bioarmor like it was paper, tearing through multiple ships before finally stopping. Secondary explosions rippled through the swarm formation as damaged vessels crashed into their neighbors. Direct hits, the sensor officer reported, his voice trembling. Enemy casualties significant. The humans are... They're not slowing down. They're increasing speed. They're heading straight into the swarm formation. That's suicide, Visiketh said. But as he watched, he began to understand that the humans did not see it that way. They were not flying to their deaths. They were hunting. Every maneuver was calculated, every shot precise. They wove between enemy vessels, too fast to target, too agile to catch. They killed and killed and killed, and they did not stop. The swarm tried to swarm them. It was what they did, what they were named for. Thousands of ships converged on the human fleet, trying to overwhelm them with numbers. It did not work. The humans fought in ways that made no sense. They coordinated without speaking, predicting each other's movements with uncanny accuracy. They covered each other, protected each other, sacrificed for each other. When one ship took damage, two more appeared to defend it while it recovered. And through it all, Admiral Chen's voice remained calm on the communication channel, giving orders, offering encouragement, laughing at death. All ships, this is Chen. The enemy queen is in the big ugly one near the center. That's our primary target. Let's go introduce ourselves. The human fleet surged forward, driving into the heart of the swarm like a spear. Visiketh finally gave the order he never thought he would give. All conquered vessels, he said softly, fall back to secondary positions. Protect the evacuation. He paused, watching the battle unfold. And watch carefully. I think we are witnessing something the galaxy has never seen before. The fairy tale had arrived, and it was more terrifying and more wonderful than any story had ever described. The swarm had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had devoured civilizations that were ancient when most concord species were still learning to use fire. They had never known fear, until now. The human fleet tore through their formation like a blade through flesh. Ships that had survived 100 battles died in seconds. Tactics that had crushed every enemy failed completely. The Swarm Queen watched through the eyes of her millions of children and felt something she had never felt before: confusion. These creatures fought wrong. They did not form defensive lines. They did not retreat when damaged. They did not protect their larger ships with smaller ones. Instead, they attacked constantly from every direction, with weapons that seemed to grow more accurate the longer the battle continued. The Queen sent her fastest hunters to intercept the human fighters. These small attack craft had been the doom of 100 fleets. They were quick and deadly, impossible to track with standard sensors. The human pilots welcomed them like old friends. Lieutenant Sarah Park flew her fighter through the chaos of battle with a smile on her face. Her squadron had been training for this moment for their entire lives. They had practiced in simulations, studied the swarm's tactics from captured recordings, and dreamed of the day they would finally get to test themselves against a real enemy. The reality was even better than the dreams. "Target cluster at heading 270, her wingman called out. "Looks like they're trying to flank the unconquered." "I see them," Park replied. "All Predator units, form on me. Let's give these bugs something to think about." Her squadron fell into formation behind her, 12 fighters moving as one. They dove toward the enemy cluster with engines at full burn. The swarm hunters turned to meet them, confident in their superior numbers. They should not have been confident. Park's first shot took out the lead hunter. Her second shot destroyed two more that were flying too close together. Her third shot punched through a hunter's engine and sent it spinning into its neighbor. In less than 3 seconds, she had killed 5 enemy craft. Her squadron killed the rest. "Cluster neutralized," Park reported, moving to support the boarding teams. Across the battlefield, human Marines were doing what no Concord soldier would ever attempt. They were boarding swarm ships. Sergeant Michael Torres crashed through the hull of a swarm carrier, with his powered armor's cutting torch leading the way. The breach flooded with atmosphere, but his suit protected him. Behind him, his squad poured through the gap with weapons ready. The inside of the swarm ship was a nightmare. The walls were made of something that looked like dried blood. Strange organs pulsed in the corners. The air was thick with spores that would have killed any unprotected Concord species in seconds. Torres's suit filtered it all out. "Contact front," one of his Marines shouted. Swarm soldiers came pouring out of side passages. They were insectoid creatures the size of large dogs, with razor-sharp claws and mandibles that could cut through steel. They moved fast and attacked without fear. Torres met them with fire. His rifle was a marvel of human engineering. It fired small metal projectiles at extreme speeds, punching through chitin armor like it was not there. When the enemy got too close, he switched to his blade, a molecular-edged weapon that could cut through anything. The swarm soldiers died. More came. They died too. "Push forward," Torres ordered. "Target is the breeding chambers. We take those out. This ship stops making new soldiers." They fought their way deeper into the carrier. The resistance grew fiercer with every step. The swarm knew why they were there, knew what they intended to do, but knowing did not help them. Humans had evolved on a world where everything wanted to kill them. They had survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other. They had turned the art of killing into a science, and the science into an instinct. Against such creatures, the swarm's endless numbers meant nothing. Torres reached the breeding chambers and planted his explosives. "All units, fall back to extraction point. 30 seconds to detonation." His squad retreated with practiced efficiency. The charges went off, and a chain reaction ripped through the carrier's core. Torres and his Marines were already in their shuttle, flying toward the next target. On the bridge of the Unconquered, Admiral Chen watched the battle with calm satisfaction. Things were going well. Better than well, actually. The swarm was dying faster than his projections had predicted. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the Queen's flagship is trying to retreat. She's disengaging from the battle." Chen nodded. He had expected this. The Swarm Queen was not stupid. She could see that this fight was unwinnable. Better to escape and rebuild than to lose everything here. "She's not going anywhere," Chen said. "Signal all ships. Phase 2. We're taking the Queen." The human fleet shifted like a living thing. Ships that had been spread across the battlefield suddenly converged, creating a wall of fire between the Queen's flagship and escape. At the same time, assault carriers moved into position, their hangars opening to release wave after wave of boarding craft. The Queen's flagship was the largest swarm vessel anyone had ever seen. It was 3 kilometers long and covered in weapons. Thousands of soldier drones filled its corridors. By any reasonable measure, boarding it was impossible. Humans were not known for being reasonable. The first Marine units hit the hull with shaped charges, blowing holes through armor that was thicker than some buildings were tall. They poured inside like water through a breaking dam, spreading out, securing positions, fighting toward the Queen's chamber with relentless determination. The Queen sent every soldier she had to stop them. It was not enough. Torres and his squad reached the Queen's chamber first. The doors were sealed, protected by biolocks that should have been impossible to crack. The squad's engineers studied them for 3 seconds, then placed a small device against the locking mechanism. The doors opened. The Queen was waiting for them. She was vast, a bloated creature that filled half the chamber, surrounded by her personal guard. She had never been threatened in her own ship before. She had never faced an enemy that could reach her. She screamed a command, and her guards charged. Torres smiled inside his helmet. "Contact," he said softly. Then he raised his rifle and went to work. The battle for the Queen's chamber lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the floor was covered in dead swarm soldiers, and Torres stood before the Queen with his blade in his hand. "This is Sergeant Torres," he reported. "Target secured. The Queen is contained." Across the battlefield, the swarm ships stopped moving. Their coordination broke down. Without the Queen's guiding mind, they became simple animals, attacking blindly, crashing into each other, dying by the thousands. The human fleet showed no mercy. They hunted down every swarm vessel, destroyed every escape craft, burned every last trace of the enemy from the stars. They did not stop until nothing remained but debris and silence. Admiral Chen finally allowed himself to relax. The battle was over. The swarm was broken, and humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in a way that no one would ever forget. "Signal Admiral Vizquez," he ordered. "Tell him it's safe to bring his ships back, and tell him—" He paused, looking at the scattered remnants of the enemy that had terrorized the galaxy. "Tell him that Earth sends its regards." On the bridge of the Eternal Sovereignty, Vizquez received the message with shaking hands. He looked at the view screen, at the human ships floating victorious among the wreckage of the swarm, and tried to understand what he had witnessed. The fairy tale was real. The humans existed, and they had just saved the galaxy. He wondered, with a sudden chill, what they would want in return. The negotiation chamber on Thesser Prime was the largest room Ambassador Kirineth had ever seen. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling painted with the stars of 1,000 systems. Banners of the 12 Concord species hung from the walls. In better times, this room had hosted celebrations and treaties that shaped the fate of civilizations. Now it hosted fear. The representatives of the Concord sat on one side of a long table. They were the most powerful beings in the known galaxy, the leaders of species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. But today they looked small and nervous, like children called before a strict parent. On the other side of the table sat 3 humans. Admiral Marcus Chen was in the center. He had changed from his battle uniform into formal clothing, a simple dark suit that looked plain compared to the elaborate robes of the Concord leaders. His face was tired but calm. Beside him sat a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, introduced as Director Elena Vasquez of Terran Intelligence. The third human was a young man in medical clothing, Dr. James Okonkwo, who had been the first to greet Kirineth when she arrived at Earth. Kirineth stood near the door watching. She was not part of the negotiations. She was too junior, too unimportant. But Admiral Chen had specifically requested her presence, and no one had dared to refuse him. The Concord speaker, an ancient Raithani named Thosaban, cleared his throat and began the formal greeting. He spoke of gratitude and alliance and the eternal friendship between Earth and the Concord. His words were beautiful and empty. Admiral Chen listened politely until Thosaban finished. Then he leaned forward and spoke. "Let me save everyone some time," he said. "I know what you're thinking. You're wondering what we want. What price we'll demand for saving your civilizations? You're imagining the worst. Tribute, territory, submission." The Concord leaders shifted uncomfortably. Chen had described their fears perfectly. Here's the truth, Chen continued. We don't want your worlds. We don't want your resources. We don't want you to bow to us or serve us or fear us. We have everything we need on Earth and in our own colonies. We're not here to conquer. The speaker found his voice. Then what do you want? Chen's face softened. For a moment, he looked less like a warrior and more like a tired man who had seen too much suffering. We want neighbors, he said simply. The room fell silent. The Concord leaders looked at each other, confusion plain on their faces. I don't understand, the speaker said. Chen sighed and leaned back in his chair. Humanity has been alone for a very long time. We knew there was life out here. We'd been watching your civilizations for centuries. But we were afraid to make contact. We were afraid you would see us as monsters. The stories you told about us, the legends about Earth, they made us seem like demons from a nightmare. The stories were true, one of the counselors said quietly. What we saw in the battle, the stories were partly true, Director Vasquez corrected. Yes, Earth is a dangerous world. Yes, humans are adaptable and resilient and capable of great violence. But we're also capable of kindness, creativity, love, and sacrifice. The stories only captured one side of us. We watched the swarm tear through your territory, Chen said. We watched worlds burn and species die. And every day we debated whether to help. Some of us wanted to intervene immediately. Others argued that it wasn't our fight, that we should stay hidden and protect ourselves. What changed your mind? Kiraneth asked from her position by the door. She had not meant to speak, but the words came out anyway. Chen looked at her with warm eyes. You did, Ambassador. You crossed half the galaxy in a broken ship with a dying crew, chasing a legend that everyone said wasn't real. When you found us, you didn't beg or threaten or try to manipulate. You just asked for help. You trusted us to do the right thing. He turned back to the Concord leaders. We've been alone too long, hidden in our corner of the galaxy, watching from a distance, never connecting with anyone. We don't want to live like that anymore. We want to be part of something larger. We want to share what we know and learn from what you know. We want to build something together. The speaker's expression slowly changed from confusion to wonder. You want friendship? I want more than that, Chen said. I want partnership. Your civilizations have knowledge and culture that spans thousands of years. We have technology and perspectives that could change everything. Together, we could do things that neither of us could do alone. He stood up and walked to the window. Beyond the crystal glass, the city of Thesser Prime spread out in all directions. Millions of beings lived there, going about their daily lives, unaware that their future was being decided in this room. The swarm is broken, Chen said, but the galaxy is still full of dangers. There will be other threats, other challenges. I don't want humanity to face them alone, and I don't want your people to face them alone either. I want us to face them together. He turned back to the table. That's what we want, not tribute or territory, just the chance to stop being strangers, the chance to be friends. The negotiations continued for 3 days after that. There were details to work out, agreements to draft, concerns to address. But the essential question had been answered in that first meeting. Humanity did not want to rule the galaxy. They wanted to join it. In the months that followed, everything changed. Human engineers worked alongside Rithani shipwrights, sharing technology that revolutionized space travel. Human doctors walked the corridors of Velthari hospitals, teaching healing techniques that seemed like magic. Human teachers opened schools where young beings from a dozen species learned together, studying science and art and history from perspectives they had never imagined. And human soldiers trained conquered forces in the art of survival. Not just combat, but the philosophy behind it. They taught that victory was not about dying gloriously, but about living to fight another day. They taught that strength came from adaptation, from learning, from refusing to give up, no matter how bad things seemed. The galaxy had believed that Earth was a fairy tale, a story about monsters from a world of nightmares. They learned the truth was more complicated. Humans were capable of terrible violence. They were also capable of terrible kindness. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day, and they had responded by becoming the most stubborn, most adaptable, most persistent species in the universe. When they fought with everything they had. When they loved the same way. Ambassador Kirineth watched it all happen with quiet amazement. She had set out to find a legend and had found something better. She had found hope. 1 year after the Battle of Thesser Prime, a ceremony was held to commemorate the anniversary. Representatives from every conquered species gathered, along with a human delegation led by Admiral Chen himself. They stood together in the same chamber where the negotiations had taken place, beneath the crystal pillars and the painted stars. The speaker made a speech about unity and courage. Then Chen made a speech about friendship and the future. But the moment Kirineth remembered best came after the formal words were done. A young Raithani child approached Admiral Chen with wide, curious eyes. The child had been born after the war and had grown up in a galaxy where humans were allies instead of myths. "Are you really from Earth?" the child asked. Chen knelt down to meet the child's eyes. "I really am," he said. "What's it like there?" Chen thought for a moment. "It's beautiful," he said finally, "and dangerous, and full of wonder. A lot like everywhere else, really. Just more so." The child tilted its head. "The old stories said humans were scary. Some of us are," Chen admitted, "but most of us just want the same things everyone else wants. A safe place to live, people to love, a chance to make things better." He smiled. "We came a long way to find neighbors. We're glad we did." The child smiled back, showing small teeth that would one day grow into impressive fangs. "I'm glad too," it said. Later that night, Kirineth found Chen standing alone on a balcony, looking up at the stars. She joined him in silence, watching the lights that represented 1,000 worlds now united in ways they had never been before. "Do you regret staying hidden for so long?" she asked. Chen was quiet for a moment. "Every day," as he said. "We could have helped sooner. We could have saved more lives. The fear that kept us isolated, it cost the galaxy dearly. But you came when it mattered most. We did." He turned to look at her. "Because someone reminded us that fear is not a reason to abandon people who need help. Because a young ambassador crossed the impossible void and asked us to be better than we were." Kirineth felt warmth spread through her chest. "I just followed an old map." "You followed hope," Chen corrected. "That's harder than following a map. Hope can disappear. Hope can fail. But you held on to it anyway." He raised his glass in a toast. "To hope, Ambassador, and to the ones who carry it." Kirineth raised her own glass.